All right, all right, all right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Mindset Monday. Today, I'm super excited to have Amy here with us today. Thank you for joining us, Amy.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you guys, this is a first for Mindset Monday in the sense that this is the first time I've had a close personal friend join us for Mindset Monday and come and speak to the group. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I feel a little bit kind of at odds because I almost feel like my personal life and my private life are going to collide. And I don't know if you guys remember that episode of Seinfeld where George is talking about that with his family and his friends and business, and he is saying, "George divided against himself cannot stand." And I just thought it's almost like today I've got my personal life and my private life coming together. But I'm really excited for a conversation today. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I'm really glad that you could be here to join us, Amy.
Me too.
So,
I I
sorry,
was
go ahead.
telling yeah, sorry, I was telling Matt I get nervous for public speaking. So and he's like, "No, it's good. It'll just be good. Just have fun." And I'm like, I know it's just hard not to feel nervous about speaking to more than one person at a time though.
Well, just out of curiosity, by a show of hands here, who else gets nervous when they have to do any little bit of public speaking? Yeah. So we're all kind of in the same boat, and
Yeah.
I'm just looking forward to our convo today. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for those of you who don't know, Amy is a registered psychologist, okay, and she works closely with parents and children. Specifically, or her area of expertise is when it comes to stress, anxiety, and helping parents overcome some of the mental health challenges that to a certain extent we're probably all faced with to some degree or another, I would think. And yeah, like I said, I'm just really looking forward to kind of diving into it today and hearing some insights and some of expertise from Amy. So Amy, out of curiosity, Anna and I were just talking yesterday, and it was really interesting because we have two young boys. We have Ezra and Ren. And yesterday was one of the very first times that we ever caught Ren in the middle of a lie.
Oh.
And he had ran off to tell his little brother or his older brother something. And we could hear him from the other room. And both Anna and I looked at each other and we thought, wow, that's really the first time that he's really lied about that. And in one sense, I was really proud of him because like it was a good lie. And like he crafted such
Yeah.
a
I know,
story
right?
where I was like, wow, this kid's smart. And on the other hand, I was thinking to myself, well, that's almost indicative of like, kind of like a cognitive development or another like milestone. And I was curious, what are some of the like, cognitive development phases or key things that you would look for, and also at what stage or what age does the brain stop developing? Because I often wonder, I'll do something around the house or with my family, and I'll think to myself, "Oh man, am I just screwing my kids up? Am I just ruining them?" And I'm sure that's something that we all experience from time to time. So my
Yeah.
question is, what are some of the key developmental phases, and at what age does the brain stop developing?
Yeah. That's a really good question that I mean, I could talk about that for the entire time in itself. But
Sure.
I mean, yeah, you know that I have two young boys as well. So it's interesting to actually see the development as it's happening, right? So, like in those situations where you catch them telling a lie, and it's like, oh, there's something more that's going on. And it's beautiful to be able to watch your child actually like hit those milestones before your eyes, sometimes infuriating.
Right, for
But
sure.
yeah, I mean, but you know, I'm the same. I've learned all these things in theory, but still when I'm interacting with my children, I'm like, I'm messing them up and there's no going back. But The biggest thing that we can learn about developmental milestones is that the brain continues to grow far into 20s, like
Into the
even,
20s even.
into 20s. Yeah. So even late 20s. So thinking about some of the more complex systems of the human brain, the frontal lobe, it's developing executive functioning skills
Right.
into, 25, 26. There's some research shows like 28, 29 years old as well. So you can see these things happening, and we know that the kids are going to hit these milestones at a certain time, and we think, okay, we don't have much time. Once they hit that milestone, right, they either have it or don't. That's not true.
Right.
It's all opportunities as they continue to grow and learn. It's just that they've reached that piece where they can, finally start to make sense of it, so that it just shows you've got lots more time to now help to kind of guide where they want their thought process to go in the future. So I mean, this might be a piece of like moral development.
Right.
So, right, the lying, I mean, you even see it in adults, like right versus wrong, good
Sure.
versus bad, and what is that? Whereas younger phases can't, it's harder for them to see that. So executive functioning skills are really important. They help us do like all those really sophisticated things that humans can do, like emotional reasoning, problem solving, focusing our attention. So they're called skills because they continue to develop. We
Right.
can continue working on them. They're not set in stone at, by the age of 6 or 14, or, wherever these milestones are reached.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there's hope for us still.
what's that?
There's hope for us still
There's
as
hope for
parents.
us still. Thank goodness, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we talk a lot about kind of like those developing ages between like 0 and about 7 or 8, and how much of
Yeah.
what a young child absorbs at that age goes on to kind of like create a bit of a framework for how they view the world, how they view
Yeah.
themselves, and some of those early habits and that sort of thing. But I think
Mm.
back to my teens, even my early 20s, and like some of the poor decisions that I made and some of the terrible situations that I put myself in. And I think, well, yeah, my brain wasn't still fully functioning at that point, or developed
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's no wonder. And when you talk about
Yeah.
the executive functions of the mind, as far as logic and reasoning and decision making and things like that,
Hmm.
it's easy to see why, sometimes at that age, people make poor decisions and put themselves in
Right.
bad situations. And we
Yeah.
talk a lot about neuroplasticity, and we talk a
Hmm.
lot about like changing the way that our brains operate and which
Yeah.
thoughts we want to fire, and trying to reinforce those. And so, like
Yeah.
you said, thank goodness that we have that time, and that
Yeah.
it's not etched in stone, like it
No.
maybe was previously thought, that we can always continue to
Yeah.
develop and change our brain as we go. Is that right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good news. Like I said,
Hmm.
that's good to hear. One thing that I'm sure that a lot of parents are curious about is, the use of screen time
Mm.
or technology. And
Yeah.
I know that this is like a daily battle in our household. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, like how does screen time affect, either the cognitive development or the emotional development of kids? And do you have any suggestions or guidelines on, what that should look like or could look like ideally?
Yeah. So I I mean, there's so much information out there about like directing parents, do this, don't do this. And it seems like such a fine line where it's like, okay, I need to give them some exposure, but I can't do this. I don't know. I just feel like as a parent myself, yes, in theory all of these things make sense, But when I'm like balancing on that line, I'm like, wait, what am I supposed to do? I also want my children to be happy and like current with technology. They're, social with it. It's a huge piece of that. But I also see the challenges at home too when my kids are on the iPad and then there's the meltdown and I'm like, never again. Yet the next day I'm like, I need a break. And so it comes out.
Right, right,
So I think like from all the research I've done, it comes down to doing what works best for your family, knowing there is, I mean, there's no, it's not necessarily, um, what am I trying to say here? It's like there's no real problems with screen time. The trouble with it is the even not necessarily even about the length of time that children spend in front of a screen.
right.
It's mainly about the type of information that's on the screen.
Mm,
So, I mean, because I mean, even now, I think I do most of my appointments over Zoom, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm on a screen all day. And then at the end of the day, I want to go on my phone or I want to watch a show, and I'm like, I am like, what am I doing to myself? And
right.
so I
Just
think that,
screen
this,
hopping.
right? And so I think, and my kids have actually called me out on that. They're like, you are in front of a screen literally all day. I'm like, yes, I am. Okay, let's think about this. My screen, yeah, right? My screen is work. I'm also interacting, I'm social, I'm learning on it. I'm working.
Right,
I'm there are all these good pieces to it. Whereas when I think about, sadly, an app like YouTube Kids, where it's just like quick scrolling videos, or say like a video game that like first person shooter games, it's where we see a lot of challenges in kids' emotional regulation, behavioral
mm,
regulation, cognitive regulation. So even that attention, being able to like hold their attention for longer periods of time because they're actually practicing the opposite. So being able to switch quickly.
right,
So it's not necessarily about the quantity of time, but the quality of time on the screen. So, interactive programs, even
educational.
educational, yeah. Even even the difference, I mean, I swear this is a thing, but my kids watching a show on the iPad versus on the TV,
Right,
where they just have such easy access to like get distracted or get bored and then they flip so quickly to the next, whereas on the TV, I mean, we also used to have to wait for commercials to play. Like my kids cannot
right,
even stand a commercial. So
right,
even like not necessarily Netflix, but like where they have to watch a show on TV, right? So they're watching Wild Kratts, and then the next show isn't necessarily Wild Kratts again and again and again. It's like, okay, I need to sustain my attention for this, and then I need to practice the shift. And then, so those are all helpful things too that we need to practice in life.
right.
Um, so it's, yeah, there are good things about the screen, the technology that we have. It's just about using it as a balance, as a tool. So
Right.
um yeah, that kind of thing.
I think that's a really good point that you bring up. And I think that, when we talk about things like mindfulness or we talk about meditation or we talk about things like that, a lot of times I will hear from people, I have difficulty focusing for that much time, or I have
Yeah,
difficulty just sitting still, or I have difficulty not having my mind wander all over the place. And I
yeah,
think that to your point there, well, how do you get good at anything? Well, you practice it, and with
yeah,
repetition comes progress. And
yeah,
what are we practicing right now? It seems like most people are practicing distraction,
exactly.
and most people are practicing immediate gratification.
Yeah,
And it's no wonder that's what our minds crave, and it's no wonder that's what our default becomes, is because
yeah,
that's what we're doing all day. and given a
Yeah.
moment of boredom, or like you said on
Yeah.
YouTube, kids, it's like the second that you're bored or not entertained anymore, it's like,
Yeah.
well, switch to the next one. But we're
Yeah.
not a whole lot different, are we? With
No.
Instagram, we just scroll this way.
Right?
Or I'm not
Yeah.
on TikTok, but I hear TikTok's the same thing, where it's just quick
I
little
know.
flashes
Yeah.
of short little blurbs, and it's just a spike in your dopamine, and then it's like on
Yeah.
to the next and on to the next.
Yeah.
And dopamine is the drug of more, and so it's
Yeah.
just keeps
Yeah.
on keeping on. It just wants and wants and wants. So
Yeah.
that's challenging. So what I'm hearing there
It
is
is.
that it's not so much about the screen time. So for us parents who are busy and who have
Yeah.
kids that sometimes need a little bit of a break,
Yeah.
it's okay to use that as a tool, but maybe just be
Yeah.
a little bit more intentional with what they're viewing or what they're watching,
Yeah.
as opposed to just giving them, freedom to do whatever they want on the internet, which of
Yeah.
course I'm sure they need.
Yeah. Which it's that comes with its own challenges, especially as kids get older. But also, I mean, I think to all everything I talk about comes with this caveat of like, but that's also fine. It's also okay. There is no like, I'm not here to say YouTube Kids is awful
Right,
or, first person shooter games. Like my kids actually love them. And so it's more so also about, I mean, and I think this is kind of my overall theme is just coming back to connect with them.
mm,
So, like if they're going to watch that, right? Like kind of talking to them as they get older and maybe hit some of those milestones and can be able to understand like, okay, this is hard on our brains. Let's try to focus. Let's try to practice
right,
this because we're teaching it to them also. And even sharing some of that, like, yeah, I do this too. I'm really trying. And so
right,
sometimes we can kind of work on that together because it is like it's not just a problem for children, it's a problem for everybody. So just knowing, right, we're in this together and I struggle too. So let's figure this out or
right.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
great point. Yeah, and that connection there too.
yeah,
It's really interesting. My son would be mortified if he knew this, but he was recent, or if he knew that I was sharing this, but he was recently grounded from devices, so no internet, no computer, no Nintendo for the last week. And this morning we were talking about it, and just like, it wasn't it nice to have a little bit of a break from that, and wasn't it nice to not have to be thinking and asking all the time, can I go on it? And he was like, yeah, it was. And he's like, I got to play my Legos a lot more. And I was thinking, he's using his imagination, he's getting creative, and he's doing different things. And it's so easy sometimes to want to gravitate towards those devices, or,
yeah,
use them like anything, like any tool. It can be used positively or constructively. And sometimes we
yeah,
can begin to almost abuse them, can't we?
yeah, 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 definitely. I know
So
my kids are the same.
they are,
But
well,
when,
probably kids
yeah,
in general. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But then when they get that chance, right, you can see that they're done with it. They're frustrated, they're melting down.
Yeah.
Like, let's just take a step away from it.
Right.
And then I mean, it even like, I mean, they love Star Wars and well, we've talked about that they are obsessed with Star Wars. But so then they play their little Star Wars game and
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, you're frustrated, like what else? So then they go and they take a lot of like the content that they were playing with and move to the Star Wars Lego or, transfer it to something else. And then you can see that imagination and that they're so much happier. So it's also not that I mean, it can give us good ideas. It can
Right.
help us, expand our imaginations. Like yeah,
It's not all bad.
there is no there's no all bad, all good. It's just, we
Right.
need breaks and to shift and yeah, practicing that.
So, what are some of the either like signs or symptoms of like stress or anxiety, or some of the like mental health things that you observe, or when people would come to you, and
Yeah.
how would somebody, parents or kids, navigate some of those challenges that, like, I'm sure are human nature to a certain extent,
Yeah.
but exist on a spectrum?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is good after talking about asking kids to come off of their device and then you see this meltdown. right?
Right.
Well, my kids for sure. And so parents talk about that, like they're angry, they're throwing things, they say they hate me, they, you know, they're uncontrollable in behavior or emotional regulation.
Right. Right.
And so that's really one of the most common reasons that parents reach out for support. And so they'll say, okay, my child's having so I work as a child psychologist, so I see the child, but then I also offer, yeah, your mom and dad can listen in, even if it's for part of it, because a lot of this that we talk about is just strategies that would
Yeah.
help anybody. It's not just for kids. It's like this huge, like our brain functions in a certain way, and you're just trying to figure it out. But most oftentimes, our parents are trying to figure it out too. Um, to understand what's going on. And sometimes it just looks different in kids and adults, right? So even thinking about anxiety, stress, um, the child that melts down after a device, or not getting something that they want, right? It's ultimately a reaction of stress, worry, anxiety, all of those kinds of things. I tend to boil it down to that being the root,
Hmm.
which ends up talking about why our brains work the way that they do. So I imagine most people have heard of fight, flight, or freeze. Have,
Right.
have people heard of this before? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I like to think about, and actually this concept came from a book that I can kind of talk a bit more about later too, if people are interested in a resource. Let me just close that up there. It's not sun poking in. It's a gray day today, but light, excess light. Um, so sometimes I like to use my fist as a visual for when I'm working with kids. I mean, I like visuals too, so it helps me to understand what's going on as well. But so this, if we think about the fist as a model of the brain, and back here is our spinal cord, the back of the brain. Inside, I've tucked my thumb in. So if we were to peel back these layers, we could see that this is it's called the amygdala. So this
Right.
is where the emotional control center of the brain is.
Right.
Um, this is where fight, flight, freeze happens. On top, like the squiggly pieces of the brain, this is our frontal cortex. This is the sophisticated pieces that helps with our executive functioning skills. Um, it's the sophisticated piece that makes us different from animals, or we develop it as we get older. Emotional reasoning, logic, executive functioning skills, um, I don't know, problem solving, all kinds of
Yeah.
things. So have you ever heard of flipping your lid? The term
Yeah.
flip.
Of
Yeah,
course.
I remember it from when I was
Never
a
done it
kid. Like I
myself, but
right, no, me neither. And like I bring up this term to kids and they're just like, no, I haven't heard that. And I'm like, oh, maybe it's like an old school thing. Like my one of my teachers used to say, oh, he's gonna flip his lid, like gym class, and everybody's getting out of
all
control in
worked
there.
out.
And so I remember thinking about that as like the lid is boiling over, like he's getting hot, he's
Right.
angry, not necessarily she too. I mean, I do this also. Um, but it's boiling over and the lid is going to flip. And so I think it's just so interesting that the brain, the model of the brain, can have its lid, and it's like this concept of the lid is going to flip. So this part of our brain doesn't actually separate, but it's like this piece goes offline. We don't have access to this. This is the logical thinking, the rationalization, our ability to communicate. We don't have access to it when this piece is triggered and sets that alarm, like, okay, lid flip, right? And so it doesn't necessarily, like I always thought as a kid, it's like, oh, well, Blair's getting mad again. for Blair. That's who I think of when about the lid flip thing, but from my grade 7 gym class. But it's this idea that it happens no matter when the fight flight is triggered, when we're
Interesting.
too hungry, too tired,
Mm,
too anxious, worried, too excited, right? We
mm,
see this happen with kids. Well, I see it with mine, right? Oh, we're going to a birthday party. And then you see their eyes glaze over and they're just, you can't get through to them, right?
right,
They're not necessarily misbehaving, but they are so excited that they cannot focus on anything else. Well, their lid is flipped
right,
and they're just focusing. I mean, traditionally, this served as like the purpose of it was to help us to survive,
right. A
right?
survival
And
mechanism.
exactly. And going to a birthday party, nobody's like, it's not life or death, but
Right,
this is some way to protect them. So the lid flips. So recognizing any time that you can't necessarily get through to your kids or to, I mean, honestly, to your partners, to
right,
yourself, to another human being in the grocery store, their lid is likely flipped.
right,
And it could be anything, but I mean basically some sort of mental health challenge, something going on in the brain that is preventing them from being able to communicate, being able to like think clearly, rationalize. And so what I mean, I don't have to leave it at that because I mean that's the struggle, right? But that's how
right,
you can witness it. And the most important piece is to be able to bring the lid down before you do anything else, because then these sophisticated pieces are now back to be
right,
able to use all the pieces of your brain um,
right.
to the full extent. Yeah.
Well, as you're describing that, like I can see that even just in my own my history and my examples of like, when I'm in that energy or when I'm in that state, it's even hard for me to find the words to communicate. Like you
Oh,
said, it's like when I'm
yeah.
angry, when I'm arguing, and it's like that part, that communication part is just turned off, and
Oh,
it's extremely difficult to regulate myself and my emotions. And
yeah.
I always say that it's pretty hard to put a lid on a pot of boiling water.
Yes.
What happens, it's like that starts bouncing
Yeah.
all over. It's like that with our emotions too. It's like once you
Yeah.
reach that boiling point and it's already boiling over, it's like, man, good luck trying to get that
Yeah.
lid back on or to stay on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how what's the best way to manage that then? Is it
Hmm.
breathing, or is it talking, or is it physical, is it mental, or is it just taking a time out and just being like, okay, hey, let's each go to our own room and here and we'll come back in
Exactly.
10 minutes.
Exactly. So timeouts have never worked for my kids. I
Mm,
don't know. I mean, some parents are like, oh, yeah, it works. It's good. They have never worked. So, in theory, I'm just like, yeah, sure. But then you have them and it doesn't. But so um, I like to call it something different. I mean, I just call it taking a break. But
right,
ultimately, it's technically a timeout. Um, but if you think about it, like as an adult, I'm like, it's not a bad thing. But when my lid flips, I need to go away. I just need a moment by myself. I personally like to breathe. And so I share this with everybody. Like, okay, so another strategy that I really like, it's very simple: name it to tame it. So
okay,
being able
name
to
it to
name
tame it,
what's
I like
going
that.
on can instantly help to bring the lid down,
Right,
but also just to help understand like it's okay. There's nothing bad about having an emotional reaction.
right,
Like being angry isn't bad, sad, depressed, anxious. Like we want all our feelings. That's a human experience, but we
right,
want to be able to have more control over them. So to be able to recognize, okay, this is what's happened. I will. I mean, some people don't like this, or like kids, they'll be like, I'm not doing that. But what I do like to do, even if it's by my side, I'll make this motion with my fingers and I'll flip the lid, even if I'm just standing. And it's like, okay, that helps me to realize, yeah, okay, my lid is flipped and I need to do something about it. And so also this visual or this like motor task helps me to physically realize that I'm bringing my lid down. So I will do 4 breaths,
Right.
nice and slow, one for each finger. And
Right.
so, like that's something that I really resonate with. But I tell kids, and some kids are like, I'm not doing that. That's silly. I don't like breathing. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And I'm like,
Right.
that's not going to help. But I'm like, it's your time to just
Right.
recognize, okay, my lid is flipped. What do I need to do? The point is not to go and sit alone, stewing and angry
Right.
still. The point is to go and be able to bring your lid down. So honestly, find something that you like to do, not a distraction. So yeah, maybe not a game, a screen, whatever, but like coloring. Do you like reading? Do you like listening to music? Make it be a really nice place so you can like sit in your beanbag chair in your closet if you want, with your little like cozy light on, with your blanket, and you just sit for a moment. Make it your space so you know, okay, this is where I go to help myself regulate. So I just call it, I'm taking a break.
Right.
And so, I mean, similar as a timeout, like similar ideas, technically, like go sit here, think about what you've done. But when you put it like that, like my kids never responded well to that, nor would I don't think. But when I take control of that and the matter into my own hands, right? Help the kids, right? Let's make your nice little spot. What is it going to look like? This is where you're going to go. And we
Well, it
help
seems like a
practice
very,
that with them.
it seems like it comes from a very different energy or a very different
Yeah.
intention with a desire, a
Yeah.
different desired outcome too. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
that feels
Right.
different, doesn't it?
I
Yeah.
think it does. I mean, you still get pushback, but
Right.
we're there to help teach them these skills, and set them up for success.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I realize we're just going a little bit over time. Amy,
Yeah.
do you have a few more minutes?
I do. I do. Sorry, I'm
Okay.
chatty.
No, no, no. I loved it. I just want to be respectful of your time too.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. As you were holding up your hand there, I love those little visuals, and it's so easy to understand when you see that. And it reminded me of something that we haven't done with our kids in a while, but was extremely beneficial when we did do it. And that was very similar to what you're talking about there, was getting people to, or getting our kids and ourselves to kind of slow down a little bit and take deep breaths. And we use the
Yeah.
hand as like a bit of a framework for that. And it was like, take a deep breath in.
Yeah. I
And we
like
kind of
that
go
one
all the
too.
way down their hand, and then you could
Yeah.
still kind of like gauge with your young child
Yeah.
how they're
Yeah.
feeling. It's like, okay, let's go back to the other side, and it just gets them
Yeah.
into their breath. It starts to regulate their bodies from like a
Yeah.
parasympathetic nervous system standpoint. Just kind of, okay, let's get those
Exactly.
deep breaths going rather than those short shallow breaths that you
Yeah.
engage in when you're in that panic, fight, flight, or
Yeah.
freeze mode. And
Yeah.
it's a great way that we found to shift that energy and to kind of gain control of that lid again so that it can come back down.
Exactly. It's it's grounding. When you
Yeah.
take something from here and put it in your body, right? To be able to focus on something. I mean, another one, because kids often hear of breathing and they're like, I've tried it, it doesn't work. And so I mean, that's fine. They might realize as they get older, like, yeah, it's really simple and it does work. But even I'll say, what about just putting both your feet on the ground and trying to feel the ground beneath your feet? And so it's literally grounding. And
Right.
and it's just, you just need to bring your attention to your body, not letting it, you know, go wild out and
Right.
about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Tony's brought that up. I think I heard you mention something similar to that, Tony, in the last couple of weeks we were talking about, how does that go? What are 5 things that you,
Mm,
Yes.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
using our 5 senses
for using
to
your
get
five
Yeah.
into the
senses,
present
right?
moment. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to kind of ground yourself. Is that
Yeah.
right, Tony?
Yeah. Absolutely. I've done it. I've showed it to people and it works for sure.
I love that one.
Yeah.
I find sometimes it's a bit challenging, like it can be a lot for younger kids because they're like, okay, 5, what's next? You know, so I'm like, just do one of each. What do I
Right,
see? What do I hear? What do I smell? Um,
right,
feel, right? And so, and then I'm like, you can build from there. Even if you just focus on one thing,
right,
but go into as much detail. So if it's sight, because that's pretty, you know, pretty easy for us, right? It's like focus as much detail on that wall that's just white, you know, whatever. But it's like, oh, there's a little nick there, and you know, it's kind of dimply, or so it can work in lots of different ways, but it helps you to bring that awareness back to your senses. Yeah, good
yeah,
one.
yeah, I like that. Well, just a couple more quick questions here before I let you go here, Amy,
Yeah,
if it's okay.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I was wondering, if you have any strategies or like communication techniques to help kind of like improve or cultivate communication with kids and help them feel like they're, safe or able to share what they're thinking and what they're feeling to kind of cultivate almost that relationship a little bit. Anything come to
Yeah.
mind for you?
Yeah, this is I think this is the whole groundwork. So, I mean, this is everything. Showing unconditional love, right? It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. You know, I mean, I come back to this a lot. There is no good or bad. We make mistakes, and you know, and to talk to them about that, help to kind of build that topic of, you know, what you might see as bad, it might not really actually be that, because good might come from it. We all make mistakes. It's about learning and growing. And so just showing them like it, I don't see that as bad. I see it as a way for us to work on that or to grow. And so kind of also like um just letting them know this unconditional love thing is, it's it takes some work, right? To show them that sometimes, especially when they do things that we don't necessarily need in that moment, right? And it's like, I still love you. That doesn't change that. And I need to set boundaries, but right, like being able to go back and talk about it at another time. So I think to showing them unconditional, and then also just communicating about anything. So I know it, and I mean, some topics do feel really uncomfortable, or like, okay, am I ready for this? Or I don't know the best way. And it's like that in itself is good to tell kids. Like, I don't know
Right,
everything. I
right,
don't,
right,
you know, I'm learning with you, and I'm wanting to grow and do this together. There is no good way to communicate. It just, even if you're worried about it or nervous, that you just still, it doesn't hold you back. You just still do it and show them that there's nothing that they need to be fearful of talking to you about,
right.
that you're the safe place. And so just practicing that, role modeling it for them, you know, it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable, but I want to be able to talk to you about anything. So I'm going, you know, so showing them, even explaining it in that way to them.
Right.
Um,
You know, I think that you hit the nail on the head there when you said kind of like being the role model. And one of my favorite quotes is by James Baldwin. And James Baldwin said that children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they have
yeah,
never failed to model their behavior. And I
that's
think
so
that,
good.
oh, yeah, and it's so true. It's like you can tell them 100 different times to do something, but they'll always watch you and they're
Yeah,
absorbing what you're doing and they'll model their
yeah,
behavior based on that. And I think that
yeah,
when you're able to be authentic, when you're able to be transparent, and when you're able to be vulnerable and admit that, hey, you know what? Mom and dads, we make mistakes too. And
yeah,
like, apologize when we're wrong or when we've done
exactly.
something, or admit to like, hey, you know what? I was really nervous before I did this and I was really scared and we can do hard things and we did it anyway. And now I'm so proud of myself, and being able to like
Exactly.
show that as well as communicate that gives them some
Yeah,
of those tools to be able to be like, okay, well, hey, if they can do that, I can do that. Because I don't know
Exactly.
about you guys, but sometimes I had the tendency when I was young to put my parents up on a pedestal. And I think that they're superheroes and that they can do
Yeah,
anything and that they never make mistakes and that they know everything. And, the
yeah,
more I think that you're able to be honest about
yeah,
yourself and some of your shortcomings, some of the challenges that you face, and that we continue
exactly.
to show up anyway and to
Yeah,
do this, that it I think equips them with some of that knowledge and some of the tools to be able to arm themselves and set them up for success
exactly.
long term. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That is just so important because like you said, right? I put my parents up on this pedestal and I mean kids, that's all you know. This is what my
Right,
mom and dad did and I love them. But then as you grow up, I mean, we're seeing a lot of these kids where the parents didn't necessarily, like, it wasn't a generally generational piece to communicate openly,
right,
especially about their shortcomings.
right,
Um, when we grew up, our generation, and we feel lesser than because we're realizing we're human, it
right,
doesn't do us any good, right? Feeling like, okay, yeah, I'm not good enough because I can't be the best mom, wife, sister, worker,
all the
man,
things.
husband, dad, right? All the things at the same time. And it's like, nobody can. But
Right,
why are we trying to do this? Why is this the goal? It's
right,
it's just it's made up. It's not a real thing.
right,
And so to look back on our parents now, right? And it's like, oh, well, they didn't do this and they didn't do that. I still love them though,
right,
but I want to learn from that and communicate good or bad and just let them know that yeah, you're enough the way you are.
right. 100%. Well,
Yeah.
I know that one thing that a lot of people struggle with is this feeling of like mom guilt. And it's termed mom guilt, but I think that like to a large extent, I certainly feel it too. So I don't think it's exclusively just moms. But do you have any like
No, yeah.
advice or tips or suggestions for people who are experiencing that type of guilt?
Yeah. It's parent guilt. Yeah.
Parent guilt, right?
It happens. And so, I mean, I also work very hard to try to overcome that as well. It's built in. But I think knowing that you are doing everything you can and that kids are very resilient,
Right,
they're learning, and it's important for them to see human beings at their authentic, genuine self, that we don't have to feel like we need to be perfect for them. There is no such thing. And
right,
so to remind ourselves and like kind of shift that thinking, no, I need to take care of myself, to role model that, right? Coming back to this role modeling, I need to show them it's important to take care of yourself. Put that air mask on yourself
right,
before you can give it to your kids,
right,
or your spouse or anybody in your life. Taking it easy on yourself, um, you know, um, communicating it. I mean, I've even communicated it with my kids, right? Like I feel guilty. Do you know what that feels like? I really want to do this for you, but I know that this is important.
right,
And as they get older, having them to understand these things, like, yeah, okay, it's okay, we'll do that tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, exactly. I want you to remember that this, right? So just even, I mean, open, transparent, and taking it easy on yourself. I think that that's one of the biggest things. There is no perfect. And if there was, it's also it's not good. We need to make mistakes and face challenges and, um, yeah, in order to grow and
right.
continue growing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Well,
Yeah.
last question here before I let you run is would you're a trained professional, you're an expert in parenting and child psychology and that kind of thing. Let me ask you, is parenting easy for you?
No, no.
No, that
And
was a pretty quick response. Hey.
no. And so this is something too, like, I have clients and they're like, listen to Amy, she's the expert. And you know, I'm like, yeah, okay, I learned this in school, and but it's not until having kids that I feel like I know more about it. But I'm learning, right? I'm like, I'm learning with you. You're the expert on your children, and it's just up to you to figure out what works best with your family. Like I'm not here, you know, I'll have parents that'll say, see, Amy's gonna say no more screens. I'm like, I'm really not gonna say that to you. I'm
Right.
gonna say, let's figure out let's work together. Let's figure out what works best. And yeah, I'm the first one to let people know, like, I'm in the same boat as you. It's hard.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't hard, we wouldn't care. If we didn't care, we wouldn't be doing a great job with our children, with our
Right.
relationships across the board. It doesn't even need to be children. I feel like all of these things can relate to any kind of relationship you have with
Isn't
somebody
that the
else.
truth? Hey?
Yeah.
You know, and the reason I asked that is because there's a story that I like to tell real quickly about. I've spent some time, I've met and meditated with Buddhist monks. And I remember having an opportunity to speak with a couple of Buddhist monks after the fact. And this Buddhist monk, I'll never forget this. He used to tell, or he told me that they still kind of get into little spats with each other, and they get irritated, they get annoyed, they have resentments, they get frustrated. And, you know, that's a Buddhist monk that
Yeah.
still has those emotions and those reactions and those types of things that say, man,
Yeah.
what chance do I have of ever
Right.
overcoming that? And if that's the expectation that I have, that I'll never feel those things, I'm just setting myself up for failure. And
Yeah.
I think that, you know, in the same sense, it's like, you know, here's somebody who's a trained professional, somebody who's an expert and still faces challenges. And I think that
Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
we do ourselves a disservice if we believe that we shouldn't be experiencing challenges, or that it should be
Exactly.
that we're setting ourselves up to fail. And just
Yeah.
acknowledging and understanding and accepting the fact that, hey, there are inherent challenges in
Yeah.
being a parent and in having
Yeah.
kids and in having relationships of any sort.
Yeah.
And the more that we understand that, the better equipped we become to move through that and to live with that. And I think
Yeah.
that it's encouraging to hear that from you.
Yeah.
So
Thanks. That's a great story. I'm going to use that in my thought process when I'm experiencing this mom guilt. This is just how humans work. I guilt again, excitement, anger, worry, they're all emotions, and that's part
right.
of getting, like, the wonder of getting to be a human is getting to experience all those things. We just need to feel like we have some control over it. But
Right.
what a wonderful thing that we get to have those deep experiences and connections with people.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, Amy, I want to thank you not only for being here today and for sharing some of your insights and your expertise, but also for being in the community. And
Uh,
you know, Amy is one of our favorite, probably our favorite person in all of Soup. And we sure appreciate getting to spend time with you, you know, outside of here, but also the fact that you're able to join us today. So
oh,
thank you for
thank you
being
so
here,
much.
and I look forward to connecting with everybody again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful. It's good for me to practice my speaking skills too, and it's just something I'm so passionate about. So I could talk forever about it, probably.
Me too. I love it. Well, hey, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy Monday, and take care, and we'll talk soon. Thanks,
See you.
everybody.